Well, good morning. My name is Michael Hickins. I'm the editor of CIO Journal. I'm going to try to dispense with the usual introductions of everybody. They introduce themselves and you have their bios in the programs. But I just wanted to let you know we have a CFO who used to be a CIO. Over here we have the CIO of a technology vendor who used to be a customer and decided that he wanted to go over to the other side. And then we have the CIO of a consulting firm, and then CIO of a media firm, and a firm whose description is too long to get into. Maybe, Christian, you can explain it in a minute. But before we started, so I wanted to say, just to start with, that I'm going to try to mix it up a little bit, get the different perspectives of the people on stage. Maybe we'll get a little bit of conflict. The first, I wanted to ask you a little bit your reactions to some of the discussion that went on in the previous panel. We heard basically from Joichi Ito and some of the others that hardware and software and lines of code are liabilities that you need to free yourself from. And it sounded really interesting in the abstract. Christian, why don't you start us off and tell us a little bit, how do you feel about that? Is that reasonable in the real world?
Well, it's a great aspiration, certainly. Our legacy has a tendency to mire firms down in complexity that limits our ability to move with any alacrity, and sometimes adversely affects our ability to take advantage of market opportunities. But that's been true for a long time, I think. I think that the notion of simplifying where it's complex is something that is worth doing. I don't know that anybody, although my esteemed colleagues here may have an answer, I don't think we've busted the code, so to speak, on how to do that. I think the introduction of some new technologies, or allegedly new technologies and opportunities like the cloud, give us an ability to offload some of the things that we had been doing inside our organizations, to move them outside our organizations, where we still have some level of control, but where we're not bound to them to the same extent that we are bound to our legacy systems. I think they also, the cloud perhaps gives us an opportunity to reimagine what our delivery mechanisms are, which is helping to propel the organization forward into shedding some of its legacy burden.
Okay, thank you. Steve, you're going to talk about cloud, I'm guessing.
Well, let me put some context around it. So I claim to be the first second-generation CIO, and I've been introducing myself that way for 15 years, and I've never found another one. So I've suddenly come to the realization that maybe my father loved me less than the other parents who didn't encourage their children to become CIOs. But with that idea, I've been watching IT through my father's eyes and now through my own experience, and everything's evolving. So if things weren't changing, if we weren't moving forward, if we weren't leaving legacy behind, we would be doing something wrong. So one of the things my father always said, and it's a mantra that I've used throughout my career, is that if you're doing something that somebody else can do or do better than you, then something only you can do isn't getting done. So I think when we get to that question, what we're really talking about is taking a serious look at, all of us as IT professionals have more on our plate than we can ever get done. So what we need to look at is, what are the things that others can do? What are the things that only we can do? And I would argue that's where the intersection of technology and business come together, is that business knowledge that we have is what really gets leveraged. And we need to liberate ourselves from some of those older responsibilities and shift to new technology so we really can focus on that business technology knowledge so we can help drive growth and innovation.
So you're talking about something that's evolutionary as opposed to revolutionary?
Well, I think it can be both. I think you can have rapid evolution, which then would be revolution.
Thanks. Bill, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to pick up on that same theme, I think, is if you look at what we're trying to do at Time Warner as an example, we've really run historically in a very vertical fashion, and we're now starting to look at horizontal services. We're now starting to look at things like Workday. And what it basically comes down to is if it's an area that there's real value added to the technology, I'm not sure you want to get rid of it. But if it, again, becomes more of a commodity type function, more of a service that others could do better, or you could do better consolidated within your own business, that's where we're heading towards. So, for example, we're now starting a shared service with all of our infrastructure support for the four divisions, for the 4 operating companies. We're moving to a common HR platform, and we decided to go on Workday for a couple of reasons. One is they'll certainly be able to keep it, manage the functionality better. We like the architecture. And by the way, we like anything in the cloud for that kind of stuff because it gets us away from a really heavy fixed investment to more of a variable investment. Go to the kind of the extreme side of our business and things like TV everywhere with HBO Go, where you can watch HBO on your iPad, and going from linear programming to nonlinear programming. So instead of having to watch things in order, you can watch it whenever you want. There's a huge technology investment, and quite frankly, there's not a whole lot of knowledge out there outside of the media and entertainment companies, and it's a bit of the differentiating technology. So that's something that we would never want to give up the assets, either the people or the hardware or the technology, right?
So, well, what Joichi was saying was that you are, or I think Eric would have also said, you're putting a lot of investment behind these things, and then if you're wrong and you've made a mistake, that's a huge investment you're stuck with, instead of making really small experiments. Is that something, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think we've had an experience where trying to figure out, you want to make as little investment as you can until you find out that it works. But on the other hand, you don't want to put something out that totally fails, right? So HBO Go is a good example. There was a structure where we used a third party to provide the hardware. It was a cloud model, but it still took a significant amount of work on our part so that when we rolled it out, the user interface was usable. The customers enjoyed the experience. And by the way, we also didn't know if it was going to be like this or like this in usage, and it ended up being like this, is have the ability to quickly respond to that. I just think a part of that session was a little academic, and sometimes when you put the pragmatic approach of how do you actually get it to work and make money off of it, you might have a different answer.
Yeah, I would pick up and I would actually take it in a slightly different direction. You look at venture stuff, right? You're trying to start new businesses. If you're a CIO and running IT, that's a little different. You want to experiment, you want to try new things. We have a little beta site ourselves internally for new tools. And we don't invest very much in those, right? We do a bunch of them, we try it out. But if there are big returns to be had because of big investments, we'll take those on as well, right? We blew up the network in like 2007, so we had a voice and data network. We blew up the whole thing, combined it all down, voice, data, video, all into one network. We invested, north of $100 million in the network. By the way, it paid for itself in 2.5 years. Well, guess what? That kind of investment, return on that kind of investment like that is a big deal because it's taken our network costs, less than in half of what it used to be, right? And quadrupled the bandwidth. So, the first 2.5 years, it was paying for itself. Now we're kind of laughing. Right now, are we going to do it again? Yeah, actually, we're getting ready to do it again, but that was only 5 years ago. But it paid off so much. So I think the key is to look at where your bets are, and I think one of the people on the earliest panel today said something about you need to look at the ROI and deliver against it. If you do that, you'll get funding as long as it's better than the other stuff that's out there in the business, right? So those get really interesting. The last piece that I say, though, you mentioned a little bit about old technology. New technologies are successful, I think, simplistically for 3 reasons. Better, faster, cheaper. The thing that holds us back is all the old technology. And one of the things that's been an aha for us on our transformation journey is getting rid of the past is a big, big, big deal.
Even talk about getting ROI, thinking about ROI, but that takes planning. And we heard in the last panel that planning is your enemy.
I think planning, it depends on what areas, right? If you were building a highway, I think it's kind of important to plan versus getting a couple of bulldozers and kind of go down. But if you're doing a tech startup or a new car or a new innovation for a car, maybe you don't plan. It kind of depends what you're doing, right? If you're doing a bridge and you start from both sides and there isn't some planning in the middle of that, you imagine there's going to be a miss, right? Right? So I think it comes down to what's appropriate for the circumstance.
Tom, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, well, first point is, am I going to be the last one all day? Because these
No.
guys steal my thunder and I got to go last?
You'll be first next time.
All right. I think, the answer to the question from my perspective is the answer to a lot of questions, which is it depends. It depends on the circumstance. Why are we embarrassed of legacy? Well, what if we had a legacy of success? Would we be embarrassed of that? Take the financial industry as an example. If you're a large bank, you have software that operates in 120 countries that you invested billions of dollars in that process 1 trillion plus in transactions a day. Is that a negative for them? How easy is it to take that business away? So I think it really depends on what business model you're in and where you are in the maturity model of your business. And so I think, legacy, something that was developed yesterday could be legacy. I think you have to look at it as far as what's the value it's creating for your company. Now, agility, I think, is important, and you want to try and strive to achieve agility. And one of the ways you can in a mature company that's in an established market is unwind things that are no longer a competitive advantage for you, that can be done better by someone else. Simplify your operating model so that you can focus more on what your core competitive advantage is. That's the way you get more agile. But I think, having great infrastructure and software that delivers huge business results for you is not a negative.
So you would suggest that CIOs spin off stuff that aren't core competencies for themselves or for their companies?
Listen, we talked this morning. It came up, 4 or 5 times. IT is a business within a business. My perspective is, if it is, then run it that way. I think it should be run as if it was a separate business. You have a portfolio of products and services. You should look at the marketplace and say, hey, am I delivering this product or service in a competitive way versus the market, or can someone do it better than me? And particularly because they have scale, right? Because in essence, the CIO running their technology is in a unique model. It's a monopoly model, right? It's a captive model with the client. So one of the things that you'd have a problem with in that model is scale. So when you look at your service, you got to say, can I deliver this service at my scale, at the right price point and quality that the market can bear? And I think that's an important thing to consider.
Sure, Frank?
One thing to build on there is we do a product and service catalog. That's how we manage our IT and deliver it, cost it, and all that. The beautiful thing about that is you can do everything that he mentioned about comparison, but it changes the dialogue with the business because you can put it in a term that a business person can understand. If you tell them, hey, our cost of networking is 0.1% of the of revenue, or it's this much per megabyte, they're like, what do I do with that, right? But if you can get down to something they can understand and productize, like the cost for our financial systems all in is this, right? Then the next question is, well, how does that compare? Well, it would cost me, X to buy it externally or Y. I compare and contrast, right? So you turn it into terms that business people can understand. It changes the dialogue with the business dramatically.
Christian, I want to just mix it up a little bit. Jump around.
Yeah, I don't often find myself talking about the cost of what it takes to run our back office or what it takes to run our network as a percentage of revenue or against benchmarks. I think, we started with benchmarks and then we moved to best practices, and now we're, moving into the area of big bets. And companies want to talk about big bets in terms of market impacts, growing top line, moving into new areas. I agree with everything Frank was saying in terms of you want to be able to speak in a language that your business units want to can understand you. But I often don't do it around those utility areas. I think we need to really make sure that our dialogue is elevated around the outcomes that affect the market, and in particular, or very specifically, our customers, right? And that's how. If I am running IT as a business, that's what I'm focused on. I'm not focused on my internal customers, my colleagues. I'm focused on my external customers. And if we can speak in terms that the business can understand in terms of how our investments in technology affect our external customers and their behaviors and their purchasing patterns, then I think we're going to have more fascinating discussions.
So is that how you raise the conversation from being tactical to being strategic?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Stephen, what do you?
I think where we need to get beyond is many of our conversations with senior leadership is about the pain of the experience. So it's not that the legacy systems are bad or that they don't do what we need to be done or that they don't differentiate us in some cases. What the business remembers, and they have a long memory, is the pain of getting to that place where it did what we needed it to do. So when I say this as part of being in a vendor company now and having been a CIO in multiple businesses, we have accepted a very poor quality of product for a very long time. And that has been the major filter through which business sees us. So we need to change that. We have accepted it, and I don't think we need to accept it. I think there is a shift in S-curves around technologies that will put more of the power in the CIO and the business's hands and less in the vendor's hands. Now let me give you an example. So before I joined Workday, I was the CIO for a global chemical company. Their IT department is what I would describe as an Eastern Bloc country. The Iron Curtain had come down, nothing had progressed for 20 years. The Iron Curtain had come up, new leadership had come in, they wanted to grow the business, and I was brought in to turn it around. So just like the Eastern Bloc countries, the reason they're ahead of us in wireless is they didn't have that installed base that they had to leverage. They were able to go immediately there. And so instead of going in a linear pattern, I went heavily into the cloud and did as much in the cloud as I could. When I went to our CEO and explained that we needed to replace our global manufacturing system that hadn't been updated since Y2K, that was now owned by Infor, where all software goes to die, and I hope I just didn't insult any sponsor.
No, but Chuck Phillips is sitting right over there.
Right, sorry about that. And IBM was telling us it wouldn't run on the operating system for AS400 that was coming out in 2013. So I'm explaining to the CEO that we need to replace it. And he says, I've been through 2 ERP implementations in my life, and I never want to do it again, ever. And then he says, however, if you can guarantee me it will go as well as these cloud implementations that we've had, I'll do it. Well, I had to say there is no global manufacturing chemical cloud offering. His response was this: then we're going to push it out past my personal planning horizon.
That's awesome.
I believe that we have a generation of leadership coming in that have lived through the painful, often career-crippling experiences of some of these implementations. They don't want to do it. We need to show them a better way. We need to insist on a better way from our vendors.
So let me ask you guys something. Show of hands, how many of you have a cloud-based ERP system?
We are in the process of Workday.
Okay. Why not?
Well, thankfully, I'm not a CIO anymore, so I don't have to do that. That's priority one. But
You get to beat up on the CIO.
you know, I think for a couple of reasons that were brought up here already. Number one is people have gone through the pain of doing it already, and you have an embedded infrastructure that cost a ton of money and took a lot of time and careers along the way. And it's also relatively new, so you also want to pick the timing. You got to match timing with the opportunity. I think that's really the reason.
But isn't all those reasons you just listed, the money that was already sunk, the careers that were involved in it, isn't that the wrong kind of reason to not move forward and not innovate?
It depends. It depends how it's serving your business right now and what the differentiator would be once it's in. I mean, it's really an economic and functional model that you would lay out to see if it's compelling enough for you to make the move. I mean, that's part of the challenge with anything legacy. which is underestimated, is the cost of that tends to go down over time from the original investment. So the maintenance of it is a fraction of what it actually costs to develop it. And so just saying, oh, there's a new toy over here that I can migrate to is not an easy decision, because the economics of that migration oftentimes don't make sense.
So the 22% maintenance fee is fraction?
You have to put the model together. It'll give you your answer.
Okay.
So I'm sorry if I could
Go
answer.
ahead, sure.
We're in the process of going to Workday, and the reason we didn't go to Workday because it's a better platform, better functionality, better architecture. It's all of those things. To build on what Tom was saying, we went to Workday because we had a burning platform in one of our businesses, and it was going to cost us a lot of money to put in a new ERP. Pick any of the ERP solutions there, and we thought it gave us an opportunity to instead spend that money on a model that we thought made more sense going forward. And by the way, we also took the opportunity to say, instead of having 5 different sets of processes and policies, we're starting to harmonize and really look at a single process, and that allowed us to then get some cost savings in the back office and the call center and such. So, Tom, it's really kind of an opportunistic decision.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would also say it's fundamentally a business decision, right? We're big leverages of the cloud where it makes business sense, right? We moved all our email there, all our SharePoint there, biggest actually email migration ever to the cloud, right? Because we're saving money, a lot of money, right? And we get out of the upgrade game. We have about 80 of our business apps, about 20% of the portfolio, maybe a little bit less than 20%, but about 80 some odd apps are in the cloud, right? Because they made sense, right? The ERP for us is relatively new. It was put in 2004. It's, when there's an opportunity, if it makes business sense, we'll do it. If it doesn't, we won't. But we're aggressively, things like the cloud, for example, all these things are tools to help you do your job better. But you have to know when to apply the tool and how to use it, right? And I think that's the key in all of this stuff. Now, if you've got a very old, behind the iron curtain IT shop, you probably have a lot more tools than you can use than if you're fully evolved and you have relatively new technology.
Christian?
Yeah, I'd actually like to take this in a slightly different direction. The conversation is around ERP, but the topic was really about the very low bar that businesses have with regards to their experience with technology implementations. We kind of settled on ERP, but I dare say that it's all major technology deployments. There's a very, very low bar that we need to start raising. We need to start thinking more and more about how we do a better job of improving the tools. As Frank said, these are nothing but tools. Well, we have to make the tools better. We have to make the tools more effective. We need to focus on, and I could spend quite a bit of time on this, around the whole concept of user experience. But if we don't start fundamentally addressing how we can raise this bar, technology is going to go through this cycle again and again and again, where every time you have a chance to innovate, everybody will hold their head and go, oh my God, I remember how painful it was to implement that tool in the first place. So it's not just the legacy of the applications, it's the legacy of it's the memories. It's the legacy of that mindset that goes, God, technology couldn't do it in the past, and they're probably not going to be able to do it without a humongous amount of pain in the future. And that's a question, that's a problem I think we have to really tackle. And I think we can tackle it by being very, very conscious, very, very deliberate in the creation of tools that make, of course, business sense. You would only do it then. But you do them in such a way as to delight your colleagues and to delight your customers. Raise the bar.
So I have a question to you guys about cloud. I saw Kevin Humphreys, who's one of the CIOs at FedEx, speak a few months ago about cloud. And he just built a new technology center and had an opportunity to really revamp everything at FedEx. And the interesting thing he said was that in the old days, you had the ISVs, the Accentures of the world, who could help you integrate all of those systems together. And now he said, and I'm quoting him, I'm all alone. So how do you deal with the loneliness of dealing with cloud? Do you want to kick that off?
I can't say that I feel alone in the cloud. We've actually, I don't feel it. Like Frank and Accenture, we weren't as big of a deployment, but we pushed all of our unified communications, email, everything out into the cloud. We moved a lot of applications there, and there's tons and tons of firms that are great to work with and partner with from a knowledge sharing perspective, and a lot of firms that are rushing to help make our experience better. So I don't know if I can agree with that premise. Maybe we are in a certain way blazing new trails, but we're not blazing them alone. And honestly, the joy that we're getting in terms of going down a new path and creating new high quality experiences as a result of moving into the cloud is having just tremendous returns amongst our colleagues and customers alike. And I encourage everybody to consider that as a viable option.
So one of the themes of this panel is supposed to be the conflict between cost and supporting innovation. And so far, it seems like you guys are really enthusiastic about the cloud, but I hear a lot about the cloud in terms of cost reduction. Anyone feel like chiming in on the innovation side?
Well, I'll throw out one observation. So I'm on the board of several startups here in Boston and out in the Bay Area. And the interesting thing about every single one of them is none of them have an IT department. I went to visit one of their sites, and they proudly showed me their server closet, which was full of wine. No servers, it's still cooled appropriately. So what I think we need to pay attention to as IT professionals is our profession, for one thing. The second thing is we as business leaders need to be looking at, do we have competition, emerging competition with a different lower cost model that we will have to deal with? And even though we may have great legacy stuff, even if it is less expensive than it was 20 years ago, is it still more expensive than what emerging companies are designing and able to put forth?
So I think innovation, it's an interesting question, and I think there's two observations I'd make. First is we're doing a lot of things in the cloud, shared services, SaaS, right? Because it allows us to get from a really strong fixed-based pricing model to a variable pricing model and allow us to be more flexible and respond to needs more quickly. For the right areas, back to the business case idea, it's cheaper to do. There are people out there who can do it cheaper and better if they're more experienced at it. But I also think there's a piece that is implicit in everything we've said so far, but we haven't come out and said it, and that's you only have so many really smart people in your technology group in your business, and so I'd rather have them worrying about innovation, Ultraviolet at Warner Brothers, or making sure we have the best support for the elections at CNN this year versus running the data centers or running our HR platform.
Do you feel that the cloud is changing the talent mix in your organization?
I think it's one, you got to understand when to use it and how to use it, and that's a skill. But I think that's a normal developmental process, as with any other new technology or new management approach in technology. I think what it's allowing us to do is free up our smart people who would have been worrying about stuff that now the cloud providers worry about, so they can worry about, instead our guys can worry about the next business innovation.
So same people, just
you only got so many
functions.
smart people with so many cycles. Once you put them on the stuff that's going to add real value to the business.
Okay, Frank?
I would agree, and I break apart in dollars, IT dollars. I think there are two buckets, operating dollars and investment dollars. And you want to minimize operating dollars and maximize investment dollars, right? Because operating email or your financial system or whatever it is, every year should go down. And you should put pressure on it. It'll force the teams to do stuff smarter, cheaper, figure out ways in their operating budgets to carve out a little bit of expense, and use the money you save and move it over to your investment dollars and invest in new stuff. The half-life on technology is actually very short. Where companies get in trouble is they run it for 20 years and they forget that this is a big problem, right? You need to constantly invest. Each generation technology is better, faster, cheaper. Spend the money, take advantage of it. You can't invest in everything in one shot, but have a plan, have a roadmap of what you're going to do in 2012 and 2013 and 2014, and make the bets and expect returns on those investments. And by the way, one of the things we found, we were a little bit of the shoemaker's children. If you go back to 10 or 12 years ago, right? We had, country-based IT. It was distributed around the world. We got some money. We started investing, and we showed very dramatic returns on an investment. You know what happened, right? We got more money and more trust. And as you do that, and success begets success begets success, right? You kind of get inertia going, right? And by the way, as soon as you have a problem, they're kind of all over you, right? But they'll give you the benefit of the doubt. And our investments and bets have gotten bigger, and we're expected to deliver on those, right? And it just keeps fueling itself.
So, Tom, there's an interesting phenomenon that seems to be going on, which is that IT spending is going up, but IT budgets are moving like this. Where's the IT spending coming from if the IT department isn't spending it?
Listen, I think that the drivers of technology investment have widened now. It's where it might have been completely focused with the CIO as an example in a number of businesses. You now have business lines directly investing in IT, and individuals purchasing IT. So I think the control around IT spend has definitely loosened up, and there's a lot more focus in the business lines of investing directly in IT. So,
how do you feel about that?
Well, these threads we've been talking about are linked. So if we start with, again, the low bar and the low expectations with regards to what firms often think about what they can get from their IT departments. And we think about then cost. And unfortunately, we spend often too much time thinking about the cost of technology as a percentage of revenue, and we're looking at it just in terms of that technology function or that technology division. You combine those things with this, this downward pressure, then you're going to find more and more of the technology investment going outside of normal governance channels, going outside of the technology group and going into the lines of business, because there is A, a lack of confidence, B, a lack of funding. So I think we have to be, again, conscious of the fact that we need to look at cost or the investment in IT in terms of what it returns to, again, create business outcomes. If you can give me, $10 million extra, I'm picking a round number, and I can add $50 million of revenue with a margin of 28%, which is in excess of our general service lines today, why wouldn't you do that? Even though it will still screw up my Gartner, percentage of revenue, right? Or if you can invest more in technology, to Frank's point, if you can invest more in technology to drive down enterprise costs, create enterprise-wide efficiencies and efficacy, then why wouldn't you do that, even though it'll increase the percentage of revenue that you spend and invest in technology?
If you're getting less money because Tom is letting lines of business guys spend your money instead, how are you going to federate all of that? How are you going to maximize the value of all of the IT spending that's going on outside of your organization?
Well, that's a real challenge. I mean, there's a healthy tension there where I think that the technology departments have to get comfortable with becoming uncomfortable. And that is putting more and more power in terms of being involved in technology decisions outside of the technology group. But if we think that we have a legacy today that's complicated, if we think that today our businesses are losing agility because we add more tools and we add more software and we add more code without taking it away, well then that problem is going to be much, much more difficult, much greater, compounded at a terrible rate if we don't figure out how to govern and architect these solutions in accordance with what the business outcomes we're trying to create.
I want to just go to Bill on this, and then I want to change gears a little bit. But Bill, you have
Yeah, I think we look at it as a total technology budget, and it goes back to Frank's point. And so, at Time Warner, there's really three big buckets. It's kind of traditional IT. There's broadcast production, so getting the shows out to the distributors, and then there's our digital platforms, and it's things again like HBO Go and CNN and CNN Online and things like that. Our overall spend is going up. The first bucket is going down, right? And we're using that first bucket as it goes down, traditional IT, the stuff we talked about at the very beginning of this session, to fund some of the other things. the truth is, our spend is going up. The business units would like it to go up even greater. There's only a limited pool of capital. So what you want to do is really focus on how you can take that capital away from the stuff that's not really adding value, not really being innovative, and apply it to the more important stuff.
So earlier you talked about mobile, and I'd like to kind of change the conversation to mobile. Talk a little bit about the mobile initiative and how that's being paid for and what the value of that is.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. It's an example of an innovative strategic thing we decided to do. And in our case, it's not about mobility of the employee base, right, or bring your own device or that. It's more about mobility of the consumers. So we're going a little bit from a B2B model to more of a B2C model, where it's about how can you watch the Warner Brothers films or shows and the HBO, right? How can you watch that on whatever platform you want, whatever device? And our CEO just said, we're going to do it. And each of you CEOs need to figure out how to do it. And you still have a limit to how much money you can spend. You still have to make your numbers, right? But you got to figure a way to allocate capital to that innovative piece, because we're placing a big bet on that says, and again, in the industry, it's TV everywhere. It's TV everywhere. We believe in 5 years is going to be the real differentiator, and is going to be the real big revenue stream for companies like ours.
So Tom, Booz Allen, you have a lot of boots on the street, so to speak. What's your mobile strategy?
Well, I mean, we've been focusing with clients on integrating the mobile technology, particularly our expertise, given our background. We do a lot of work for the government, the intelligence agencies, and the like, and we have a very good practice in cybersecurity. And what we've been working with clients on directly is helping them put the appropriate security infrastructure around their mobile strategy so that they can be comfortable integrating new devices like iPads, iPhones, and a number of emerging technologies, so they can do that safely. We do it internally, and we do it for our clients.
Frank?
Well, I would take it a slightly different way. So Accenture, 250,000 people around the world, in 50, 70 countries. We have 300 locations of our own. Turns out we're missing one thing. We don't have a corporate headquarters. We actually have never had one. One of our predecessor organizations did, but we don't. Our people show up at over 10,000 locations every day and have for a long time. Our clients, the airport, the hotel, at home, et cetera. So the company works in a distributed manner. And our CEOs in Paris, our CFOs in New Jersey, our chairman's in Boston, right? We're spread around the world. Head of one of our P&Ls is in Italy. So we're pretty distributed. We come together periodically, but we're pretty distributed. So we rely on the technology to stitch the company together, from a communications, video, desktop video, telepresence, audio. Everything has to show up. All our technology has to show up on your computing device, right? So we start there. On the mobile side, on the pure, I already think that's mobile. People forget that the laptop is one of the mobile devices, right? By the way, you can turn an iPad into a laptop. You need a keyboard and a mouse. It's kind of funny. I've seen people do that. I'm like, they actually sell one that's all integrated. Different way of looking at the world. But so we have 100,000, 120,000 laptops. We have 100,000, 102,000 mobile devices, smartphones and tablets. In that population, roughly 70% are employee purchased, right? So we've gone pretty heavy on the bring your own device, because we know our people want choice, and they're willing to pay for it. We have 11,000 iPads in the environment. We haven't bought any, right? So we've gone down that post. Give people flexibility on what they need.
So how do you manage that?
Well, we put security and policies down onto the devices. So if you want in to get to stuff, you have to kind of sign up for that. But beyond that, right, from a management perspective, we do a no support, your own tech support, right? If you lose it, yeah, call us and we'll help you, wipe it or whatever. But other than that, the tech support goes to them. If you want to use a whatever device, you made a choice, right? And we've found that works generally very effectively, right? Because there's a passion around it. And if you don't like that, you can use our standard devices, right? We give you both options. We'll pay for the standard one because we can support that one, Right, and we'll do, answer a question for people like how to connect to the Wi-Fi or something. But generally, it's all online self-help support.
Stephen, what's the mobile strategy at Workday?
It's a key piece. So we're really looking at how people do work, and just looking out here in the audience at the number of heads focused down into a bright light coming out of your lap. You're all working mobily, or a good portion of you right this very second. So it is the way we do work. It is the way that we will do more and more. So if you look in your organization, this trend is coming from the top down and from the bottom up. If I go out in my organization and look to the youngest members of my team, they'll have 2 PCs on their desk. One is the one I gave them, and one is the one they actually work on. And so that's kind of an expense I don't need if we're talking about cutting costs. So we need to be paying attention to this. Now, we can't get hung up on the device. It's got to be the quality of how we interface with that device. So there's lots of clunky ways to try and do work mobily. So we really have to come up with the right formats and the right technologies. But it's also the content. Data, how are we getting the analytics and the decision-making capability to the mobile devices so they can truly be effective while executives and employees are on the road or in motion.
So Christian, you've put a lot of emphasis at UL on collaboration tools. Do you see social media as a way of federating a lot of different collaboration tools that companies have tried to implement over the years, from knowledge management, I hate to even bring up the term, to document sharing, chatting, video chat? Or do these things need to be siloed the way they seem to be now?
Well, we're trying to figure that out. First and foremost, we have made a very significant investment in communication and collaboration. We did that because we're trying to unify a very global workforce. But more importantly, we're trying to create avenues in which we can connect and communicate better with our customers directly. And some of the investments that we've made, again, in these cloud technologies around unified communication, and that we're building our delivery processes around. So that's key. It's not just about email. It's not just about SharePoint. It's actually about building end-to-end processes that leverage and take advantage of these technologies. So we're doing a lot in that space. And social, insofar that we are getting further and further down the path of building in collaboration and even to some extent co-creation of content with our customers and partners. There's a social component to that. I'm not sure we've got anything. I don't think we have the bigger question that you're asking answered yet, though. I can tell you this. I think that there's a better way for us to communicate than using email. And I think that the firms that crack that are going to be much more effective in connecting at a deeper level with their customers. The email, and I'll probably get speared after this, but I think email is one of the biggest productivity killers in the workplace. And I think it does a lot to diffuse the relationships that we have with our customers. And I think if we can figure out how to use different mechanisms to engage in real dialogue with our customers and our colleagues, we will change our workplace.
Tom, any thoughts about that?
Well, I think this issue around the client is an important one. Like, one of the things that we've seen, once again, I know this is all about technology, but we sometimes lose the forest through the trees, which is the personal communication. I mean, we've really, in both my prior jobs and even conversations I have now in this new role, is, after the technology wave has hit, people's behaviors have changed. The way they approach clients, the way they interact with people, a lot of it's been positive. There's been a lot of negative. And we've seen, cases, a loss of personal touch, loss of direct, connection with your clients. It's a huge difference, communicating, like you said, via email or text messaging or whatever, than to make a client visit, to go to the client, to sit down with them, take them to lunch, have a personal conversation with the client. We've taken the technology. Another what I think is a challenge is we've done some good things. You have the whole concept of work at home and all those types of things. I take advantage of it. We probably all do. It's a beautiful thing, okay? But there's also some negatives that have come with it, which is the collaborative team environment. I think some of that communication, collaboration has been lost. And so what the challenge really is now with the technology and mobile computing and how it keeps pushing the envelope is to, not throw out the baby with the bathwater, right? How do we still maintain that personal touch with our clients? How do we still maintain that highly productive work environment when people are all over the place and working at home and the like? We can't lose sight of that. And the negative aspect of that has impacted business. It definitely has.
So, Frank?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you're right. So I'm not an email fan. I first started using email in '79. I was wondering when the whole world would get on it, how convenient it would be, and how wrong was I? My EA pointed out I have 9,000 unread emails, so I'm kind of proud of that. I deleted 1,000 last night, so it's down to 8,000, so I feel better. But nothing really important happens in email, one man's opinion. So Christian and I maybe were together on that. Very little, I think, happens there. We've actually moved a lot more to video to get that interaction going. I do most of my meetings, my remote meetings, are on video now. And it's very weird when you have an audio call. It feels like you don't know everybody who's on, right? You don't know what people look like. You don't see their visual reaction to points that you're making, et cetera. It's very weird, but it's hard to get people used to it, to make that the norm. There is a transition that's going on, right? The video stuff's gotten pretty cheap, right? Desktop video is, for us at least, it's less than a penny a minute, right? So it's next to free. It's going to show up everywhere. And if you really want to know about it, and I think on a lot of the topics we talked about, go look at your kids, right? Go look at the kids, right? My daughter, she either texts with her friends or she Skypes.
But
right? That's the next generation.
The big difference between our kids and employees is adoption, right? Kids naturally adopt Facebook.
Right.
What are people going to adopt in the workplace so that it really becomes an efficient tool?
Well, I think you need to drive change, right? And your leadership has to embrace it. Our CEO is a big fan of video, right? He's been the CEO now for coming up on a year and a half. He's using it a lot, right? We used to have in-person meetings for the leadership team and then conference call dial-ins. So about a year ago, we had an in-person meeting of the top 100 and so people at Accenture. Good meeting, good, everybody showed up, et cetera. In the fall, he had a 2-hour video webcast conference call, all our telepresence room, or a lot of them around the world. We had 89% attendance. The 11%, almost all of them watched it on replay because it was video. And the really wild part, it was more interactive. Because when you have 100 people in a room, it's hard to be interactive. But when everyone's on video, everyone's in the front row. And they talk and they interact. It was dramatically better meeting. Not that the one in person was bad, but this was different. And that's going to be our norm going forward. We're doing more of that.
Stephen, what are you guys doing for collaboration?
I'm going to start out with maybe an idea. So I mentioned my father earlier, and he was a CIO, and I think a leader in the industry. But the wisest thing he ever shared with me had nothing to do with technology. What he said was the quality of our lives is directly proportional to the quality of our relationships. It's true in our families, that's true in business, that's true in our communities. So as we move to these new technologies, that's the question we need to be asking. How does this improve the quality of my relationships? Because at the end of the day, that's the measure for just about everything.
Bill, do you have...
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the focus on this technology is around two parts. One is it adding value to the business, or is it detracting, and using it correctly? And it should be building relationships either within your internal communities so they can work with each other or with your customers. And then I think, quite frankly, it's recognizing because they're all tools, right? Which tool is the appropriate tool for this case? And so although we've all bad-mouthed email, I have to tell you, email in CNN is a critical business tool because a lot of the reporters out in the field, it's a way to get video files back to the producers in New York or Atlanta or London, and it works, right? It works from remote fields, it works. And so, you know, I think the key is to really recognize the right tool for the right business problem.
So you've been CIO a number of different places for a couple of years. What do you do when something that you really believe in doesn't get funded? Do you scale it back a little bit and try it with less funding than you would have thought, or do you push it off for a year? How do you?
Yeah, I think you know, obviously you're in a position of fiscal responsibility, and you need to align your goals with the goals of the company, and so you're not going to hide things. But I think there is an ability, if there's an idea you really, really believe in, there's alternative ways to fund it. There's alternative ways to do it in a small scale, and then you know, get a proof of concept going, or get some, you know, grassroots effort going, and then it does one of two things. Either it works, and then you can go and convince the business that this really works and we should fund it in a larger fashion, or it doesn't work, and guess what? You only spend a little bit of money and spend instead of a ton of money.
Frank?
Well, you know, it's interesting. So in our governance structure, the COOs of the company are the IT steering committee. So we have 5 P&Ls, so 5 COOs from there, 3 capabilities, and some for the back office. And so these individuals become the governing body of IT. And when stuff doesn't get funded, it actually makes sense, right? And because it's what the business wants. And they've been great counsel to us over time. I remember we were talking about a vendor negotiation we were having, and to be honest with you, I was a little pissed at the vendor and the cost, et cetera. And they said, you know what? I remember the COO of Resources, a good, very hard-headed, good, solid business guy, said, Frank, just make sure you don't get distracted because there's so many other things you need to do. So fight for a good price, but don't put us in a position where we're going to be distracted for the next year or two doing some migration that we don't need to do, for example. I was like, okay, that's good. We had another one where one of our lead of sales wanted some new technology capability. It didn't get funded. He got royally upset. And I said, well, maybe we change the funding model. You could have your own money to invest. And after he calmed down, he said, you know what? At the end of the day, those guys run the business. So if I want to go build something, I need them to make us use it. And if they're not behind it, it's a waste of money. And I was like, okay, that is very good, right? You've got to have that connection to the business.
Tom, from your perspective, how do you judge a project that comes to you from the CIO? Do you always do you give your CIO carte blanche?
No, I think when you look at the portfolio of projects, products that the CIO manages, you have to look at who's the primary owner or the sponsor of a particular product. In CIO supporting a large business, there's business sponsors, and they're the final call. And I think at the end of the day, if you feel passionate about a particular investment in a client platform, you have to articulate that. You have to, as we mentioned before, it's a business decision. You have to put together the facts, the numbers, the upside, the downside, and then it's a business decision that the client has to make. Now, on the other hand, in a CIO's world, there's a significant infrastructure expense where I view, like, that's the key CIO responsibility, because the client can't opine on those things. They're really, that's what you're paid for. It's your background, it's your skill set. That tends to be a lot of things and a fair amount of money. So if it's something in there, then you as the primary sponsor have to prioritize, and if it's compelling for the CIO, they figure out how to fund it and where to cut back on other things. That's how I see it.
Christian, last week we had a little conversation. We talked about measuring your own performance. How do you measure the performance of your group and yourself?
Well, I would tell you that in terms of us being able to measure ourselves, we got a long way to go. We need to improve our ability to measure ourselves. I wish we were better, but we are making progress. I have a unique opportunity and responsibility, and I'm not just the CIO, I'm also the head of the Enterprise Transformation Office. And so part of my responsibility is to execute against the organization's largest investments and change programs. And each one of those change programs has a series of measures associated with them. In the case of where we're doing a back office transformation as our company is going through this massive reimagination of itself. We have measures in terms of how we are simplifying processes, and we're going from many to one. And so that's an example of a measure. On the other side, where we're focusing our efforts on transforming our customers' experience, we have measures with regards to how much input we're getting from our customers in determining what that service is ultimately looking like. There's an example of 2. I wish I had in my portfolio 100. I probably have about 12. And some might say you don't want to get too many measures, but I personally don't want to look at too many measures, but I know that my group needs more measures in order to guide them effectively to bubble up to get me the most meaningful results. And as I said, I have some ways to go.
Stephen?
We have 2 key metrics that drive us. As a cloud company, 0 security breaches and 95% referenceable customers. So happy customers, good relationship with customers, and trustworthy. So 2 metrics that drive that.
Well, how do you tie IT to happy customers? I mean, customers could be happy for a lot of reasons.
If the product is performing, if it's stable, it does what they need it to do it, it's easy to work with, so all the IT things are there. From a customer's perspective. Internally, can they get their job done? There's kind of the hygiene factor. IT doesn't get in the way, it's a good day in some organizations. And then you have metrics around how does IT help? How does it help with growth in that? So we look at kind of 2 things. Well, you have customer satisfaction on the internal metrics as well. And that kind of says that's the hygiene factor. So Maslow's hierarchy, if they got food and shelter, do we provide food and shelter? But then the other set of metrics that are a little harder, they're a little bit tougher to nail down, are the self-actualization metrics. Do we make them better? Do we help them grow as individuals and able to get their job done, and then therefore help the company grow and get better and get its job done?
Bill?
Well, I think it's interesting for me in particular because I'm the first enterprise CIO at Time Warner, so we've got a whole set of different metrics and no consistency across the businesses. But I think in the last 10 months since I've been there, we've started trying to really put some thought around what are the right metrics at the enterprise level as well as in each business. And I guess I'd come back to the answer or the line that Tom used earlier. It depends, right? And so there's a lot of money we spend, and the traditional metrics are: did you spend it within budget? Did you get it done on time? Did it meet the user's requirements? Is it adding the value you thought it would add, either in increased revenue or reduction in cost? And those are things you can measure, some a little bit more easily than others. But then there's also, we're wrestling a bit with some of the subjective metrics, and it comes around things like innovation. And do we feel, again, and you can measure, some of the hard metrics saying we're spending less money on the operational stuff and more money on the new stuff. But then when you say, of that new stuff, are we feeling good about the investment we're making, given where we think the marketplace is going, our customers are going, and the industry is going? And sometimes that's just, partially sitting down with the customers, internal and external, and getting more of a subjective metric to it.
Frank, how do you?
It's a good question. I think it comes down to what perspective you're measuring, whose perspective the measurement's coming from. So we have a strategic scorecard that we report on quarterly also. It's just 24 metrics, right? It's been the same metrics for a number of years, so we have a good year-on-year comparison. But for me, I look at, so my boss, what does he look at? He looks at overall budget performance, project performance, and no noise. When he doesn't hear noise and we put in, a new time reporting system or we moved everything to the cloud, he's like, and I'll tell him about the project, and he'll say, and there was no noise. So for Yo, that's a big deal. For my team members, is what they've gotten accomplished. I look at their accomplished, what I asked them to do. For me, it comes down to people and relationships, right? The people I've gotten to know over the years, I see a bunch of people in the audience that I've had the good fortune to get to know, and I see as peers, and we exchange information, ideas, including like great places, great things to do in London that I would have never even, that changed my point of view on London, right? Oh, that's valuable, right? That's important. The relationships, who you get to know, who you exchange with, watching people's kids be successful, these are all important things. That's the essence of life. Back to your point, our relationships, that to me is the measure, right? Watching people on my team develop, go on and become CIOs elsewhere, that's a lot of fun, right? So those things are, to me, those are the personal measure, but I don't actually have a scorecard for it.
I mean, not to sound hard-hearted, but it doesn't sound like those are very measurable metrics for an IT leader.
No, I have the scorecard, right? I have the cost per person and all the budget and blah, blah, blah. We've done really, really great on that, or else I would have been gone a long time ago.
Tom, what do you, from your position as a CFO, what do you look for?
I think that I've had a lot of experience in this space, and that means a lot of failure and a lot of scars to go with it. But what I've found to be most effective is market-driven metrics. And this is what I was talking about before, about how internal IT can do just that, be too much internal focused, right? And some of the things that I've done and I've seen clients do is the more they get market metrics, market comparisons, market benchmarks, and we're working, as Booz Allen right now as an example in the cyberspace, benchmarking a number of the top financial institutions in the world in their capability and what they spend for it. They want that information, because if you were running info security at a firm and you go in front of the board and you say, listen, I need to invest some money in this particular area, and oh, by the way, look at this. This is a comparison against these well-respected firms, and this is how we stack up, and we have a real gap here. That conversation to the executive team is much more compelling than any internal IT metric. I think it was mentioned before, internal IT metrics, personally, I've had limited success with that because they don't necessarily understand them, and maybe they don't want to understand them too. Both things together. But when you show them, if you're a city and you're a Citibank as an example, and you show them, this is you and this is how you compare to Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Bank of America, they're awake. They're focused. They get that because that's the nature of their business. So I think in general, performance around IT, to the extent you can make it market-driven and market comparison, and at least in the financial industry, we actually share a lot of this information now. People don't think we do, but we do. We share compensation information. We share IT expense information in dozens of categories, and we compare it to each other. Of course, it's anonymous. It's company A, and here you are in the spectrum. But that stuff has worked, and that stuff's much more compelling, I find.
So Chris has told me that it's time to open up the floor for questions. There's a microphone there and there. I invite you to come and ask questions. Please.
For a great panel. My name is Michael Krigsman. I write a blog for ZDNet, and I have written literally 1,000 blog posts on the subject of why IT projects sometimes go wrong and how the CIO can be successful and the underlying dynamics. So my question is this. I'm a great cloud supporter, but given the fact that many issues that IT has in relating to the business and in achieving success have nothing to do with technology and everything to do with communication, collaboration, knowledge sharing, going across silos, and so forth. So how then can businesses be successful with the cloud if it's not fundamentally a technology issue in a way that they have not been successful with on-premise? And I'm a great cloud supporter.
Christian, you want to take that one first?
Well, I think you, in your question, you gave the answer. I mean, a cloud is just another technological engine in the background, right? That the IT, the technology groups can bring to bear and maybe unique in different fashions. But when projects fail, they usually fail for a number of reasons long before the technology product is selected, long before an investment is made in tool A or tool B. And they fail for the reasons that you were talking about: a lack of relationships, a lack of good communication. I'll throw in a couple words that you may have said, but I don't recall: a lack of proper ownership, a lack of proper accountability, where these initiatives should be business projects, business initiatives owned by the appropriate business leadership, with technology again being an engine that's delivering against it. Where those things are proper and right and highly, you have a cohesive organization striving to the same goal, then you can apply whatever tool it is, whatever engine in the background, in this case cloud, to be successful with it. Don't have it, yeah, you're going to have just as many failures with cloud as you will with anything else.
Anybody else want to react?
So for me, it's a balance of freedom and order. I think a lot of the reasons we failed in the past is actually erring too far on the side of freedom. We could customize on-premise, so we did. And that customization is what caused a lot of the failure. The cloud forces a higher level of order. And so it kind of says, here's the guide rails, and you need to stay within this. There's still quite a bit of room to move and configure. You've got to stay within this. So for me, it's a balancing of freedom and order, and we're now shifted to more order, and therefore it then liberates us to then spend more time with the business, communicating, being an advocate for the business and for technology within the business.
Tom?
Yeah, I would just say quickly, one of the prior panelists mentioned this, and my own personal experience, it rings true. The time from thought till the time it's in the user's hands, that's the killer in most projects that I've seen. So trying to shorten that time frame so that you get the feedback from whether it's a conversation, a document, a specification, to the actual usage, that's key. I mean, and having processes in place that shorten that time frame. Now, if the cloud, as you mentioned, is a tool to shorten the time frame so that you can get the product in front of the user, that's a home run.
Thank you. Very, very insightful comments. Thank you.
John Kingsley, I'm with AECOM. We're an architecture engineering company. Question around the video, and specifically some of the comments about Accenture, but open to everybody. When we're looking at increasing it, we've got some telepresence for executive communication, but I'm trying to democratize it and really get it out so the people earning the money can actually talk to each other and collaborate globally. What's the feeling around high definition, really high quality, high bandwidth, no jitter, which is what my executives demand, versus the investment that we need to make to, got about 45,000 employees in 120 countries, maybe not 10,000 locations, but getting into that range. What are your thoughts on that?
So a couple of thoughts on video. First off, there are a lot of things that factor into video, more than I realized getting into it. There's low def video or webcam video and high def. High def is more expensive because it takes more bandwidth. Interesting enough, we originally rolled out telepresence at 1080p. And as an experiment, we changed a couple of rooms to 720p and didn't tell anybody. And we got no complaints. And then my network guys pointed out, you know what, that cuts the bandwidth in half. So I think we got a couple of Accenture people in the room, so I probably shouldn't tell them because I'll get some complaints, right? But we actually cut them all to 720p because no one could tell, right? We did that at the high end. We've actually rolled out more desktop units and actually high-def cameras that plug into your laptop. We're doing more of that. And then on the desktop, the more for the masses, we've gone with webcam. We use Microsoft's Link product for video. The really interesting thing is on the webcam video, it comes down to quality of the webcam, but it also comes down to lighting. Lighting is really important, and bandwidth is really important. So if you're on good bandwidth with good lighting with a webcam, actually the experience is pretty good, right? And I guess you could probably tell that it's not high def, but you're a little more hard-pressed to tell. Position, lighting are very important. Distance from the camera is very important. One of the things that Cisco figured out, right, was lighting, distance from the camera. By the way, the reason they sell you the table is it enforces distance from the camera. People sit at the table, right? I guess it wouldn't have worked if people kind of sat somewhere else, but right. So there are a lot of things that in video, there are a lot of cues that you can do, and some of that will be education. Right? Make sure when you're somewhere you've got good diffuse ambient light is important.
So I think, I'm sorry, I also think it again depends on what you're using it for. So we, very distributed company, headquarters is in New York, one business is headquartered in Burbank, one in Atlanta, two in New York, not close to the headquarters, and we put in telepresence primarily for the CEOs to be able to communicate more frequently. What I find now is if you can imagine, the last year we've taken a heavily distributed organization and said we're gonna now govern it differently, right? It's going to be a federated model, and there's going to be some relationship to me at the enterprise level, and you can imagine the kind of sticky interpersonal things that are going on. And so what I found is very effective is if we can't meet in person, the CIO council will meet over telepresence because the body language is so important. Now, if it's trying to get somebody in HBO to talk to somebody down in one of the Turner businesses, and it's around the technology or an architecture or a process, the webcam is just fine.
Is there a linkage between trying to pull in the webcams into the telepresence, and does that degrade the experience too much to make it useful?
We're doing more of that. We've got bridges in place that span multiple technologies now, which have been really helpful for communicating with our clients. We haven't done the webcam stuff yet. We've played with it a little bit. We got some concerns about licensing, actually, but that would ultimately be the direction. I actually think over time you're going to see high def show up on the laptop, right? It's not going to be that much of an uplift, right? So then you'll have better you have better experience intermixed. But I think Bill's right? Yeah, it depends what you're trying to do.
Thank you.
Susan Cooklin, CIO at Network Rail from the UK. What I'm interested in is I've heard you talk a lot about collaboration between different elements of your business as CIOs and with other CIOs. How have you built trust, rapport with other members of the board within your businesses? And how have they measured the success of what you're doing? Or how have you measured the success of what you're doing?
Bill, you want to take that one?
Yeah,
to start?
So it's an interesting situation I kind of got put into. So it's the first enterprise CIO, and I'm sure somebody I think said it when I was talking to him over one of the breaks. It's a bit like herding cats, right? And so each of the CIOs is really, they're smart first of all. They know what they're doing. They're really effective, but they're aligned with their individual business unit. And for us, it's really, it's process, it's governance, it's all those things you'd read about in any of the literature around this. But what it really comes down to is building that trust among the team, and then slowly changing the culture so that the CIOs are now measured not just on how well they perform for their business unit, but also at the enterprise level. And so we're doing some very pragmatic things, like there are strong dotted lines in place, right? So there's some level of control over compensation and performance review, and I know that certainly focuses me on what I should be doing. I know it certainly helps with the CIOs. We're still, I've got the good fortune to be in a company where they're giving me some time to do this. So the measures so far are kind of a little loose, a little subjective, but pretty soon we're going to have to get to a point where, some of the hard measures might be how much capital did we free up from this stuff and invest in new stuff, right?
I'm told we have time for one more question. So unless anyone else had something to add, move to that.
Dennis Ringlander with Avaya. We've heard over the years the CIO trying to get a seat at the table to be able to get more funding for what they're trying to do. Are we seeing IT centers of excellence making it to board level? We see audit committees on the boards. We see governance committees on the board. Are we seeing anything, or is it time to try and start working towards IT for excellence board committees? Are we seeing anything along those lines there?
Tom?
Well, one area I was pretty fortunate personally, which was at both Credit Suisse and Merrill Lynch, I reported to the CEO and I was on the executive team, which is rare, but hopefully a trend where the position is elevated to that level. On the board, what you traditionally see is an individual focused on risk, and part of risk would be IT risk, so they get very involved in IT risk conversations and issues. What I do see happening, which is interesting, is a little bit lower, and then maybe to the board level, the head of information security might actually become a peer in some institutions with the CIO, because it's so specific and intense and an area of exposure. Usually it's tucked under the CIO, but I see how it's emerging where it could become part of a peer role with the CIO. And I think maybe eventually that particular role could move to the board level, because information security, cybersecurity is absolutely a board level issue.
Any other thoughts? Well, thanks very much to the panel. Thank you.
I have a good